Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Certified Forgotten. We are normally your podcast that talks about horror films with 10 or fewer reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. Sometimes, probably every other episode, every third episode, we're also going to drop an Uncertified on you, which is a conversation between me and my co host, Matt Donato, about a newer release, a movie that is in theaters, in film festivals, on VOD, or in the case of today's film, all three at the same time somehow. I'm not entirely sure how that works, but yeah, something that's more recent that you can check out and maybe add to your list of movies, or hopefully will end up on your list of favorite horror films of the year. I am joined by the hardest working man in horror. It's Matt Donato. How you doing, buddy?
Working hard, not hardly working. That phrase cannot be used for me. No, just got home from Overlook, so my voice is still a little shot. Gonna do my best on the pod, but I'm feeling more normal than I ever have throughout this week. But I'm excited to talk about this movie today because you are more of the sci-fi horror guy, and you reviewed this for Certified Forgotten. And I mean, we'll get into the discussions of what we liked or what we didn't like, but I don't know. You're the Event Horizon guy. This is up your alley. I'm more curious to hear your take on it than my probably middle of the road, because sci-fi horror is something that is just it's like always just out of reach for me.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna put a bold prediction out there. I think that one of my favorite social media, I don't know, memes, whatever you want to call it, is the like complimentary pejorative tag that you add to, posts to let people know that whether you're being a dick or not. I have a feeling that you and I are going to say that this movie is fine, and for me that's going to be complimentary, and for you that's going to be a pejorative. That's where I think we're about to land.
We'll find out.
Okay.
Don't box me. Don't put me in a cage.
Nobody puts Donato in a corner. I would never dream of doing so. All right, well, let's talk about this particular movie, because the film on today's episode of Uncertified obviously is Ash, the new film by Flying Lotus. Quick plot synopsis, a very brief plot synopsis for those who have not gotten a chance to see it yet. Imagine opening your eyes and finding yourself on a planet a million miles from Earth with no memories of how you got there. Unfortunately, that's the good news for Raya. The bad news is her crew has been violently murdered, and she's quickly running out of oxygen. As she fights to survive, Raya soon realizes she is not alone. But trust is a hard thing to come by at the edge of the universe. The first full-length feature from artist Flying Lotus. He's done shorts, he's done segments in VHS films, he's done an anthology movie, but this is the first full-length feature. Ash is a stroll through memory lane for anyone who grew up with a healthy diet of science fiction video games. Matthew Donato, did you see this at... Where did you see this? Was this a South by Southwest watch for you?
This indeed was the premiere at South by Southwest for me.
Was it? Does that mean it was at the Paramount?
Yeah, I got to see it at the Paramount, which is really cool because anyone who knows, you have a streaming service like Shudder, which does a good job of getting movies into theaters. But when you have the opportunity to see it at a festival at a theater like the Paramount in Austin, Texas, just one of these big grand places where so many historical movies have played, it is an experience. It's nice. It's nice to see that where it deserves to be played versus, on a streamer, which again, that is not Shudder's fault. It is a streamer. That is just the nature of the industry at this point.
Yes, I saw this a week after it came out, a week-ish after it had had its theatrical release at a Cinemark with two other people in the audience behind me. So I think that we both benefited from seeing it on the big screen. I think that you probably had a more lively crowd than the two random guys that sat on opposite ends of the theater behind me. But good. I feel like that's a good grounding. We both saw this in a movie theater, and I do think this is one of those films where seeing it on the big screen, especially for some of the stuff that Flying Lotus is trying to do visually, works in the movie's favor. Not to say that it wouldn't be as good on a smaller screen. It's definitely a film that is trying to milk every dollar of its budget into creating kind of a cosmic horror sci-fi rather than just another Alien rehash. So what were your big takeaways? What were your big thoughts about the film?
Big thoughts. What were they? Good question. I reviewed it for Daily Dead, and the way I felt about it is it takes a little bit to really get going for me, because when you talk about the idea of being influenced so heavily by science fiction, horror video games, but even just horror video games in general, I believe Flying Lotus referenced Dead Space, obviously, but also
Hmm.
Resident Evil, Silent Hill. Like there is a pantheon of knowledge in Flylo about horror video games in general, but you don't really get to that until maybe about halfway through. There
Right.
are bits and pieces here, there are teases, but there's a lot of Gonzalez's character just kind of wandering around the space station and piecing things together, and that section takes a little long for me. So in the end, I think it's one of those movies that could use a little shaving. I don't want to say like it would have been better as a short, because I think it is a full feature. It has plenty of
Yeah.
exploration in it. It is a mouthful. It's a full bite. But in the same regard, I think there are just elements here and there where it drags at points. But that is also saying that Flying Lotus is great with visuals, because even though it does drag somewhere for me, like you know how I am with slow burn, you know how I am with
Hmm.
like long build ups. If you don't know, they're not one of my favorite things. I'm a little harder sell on them, but going back to what I was just saying, Flylo's visuals, that's the draw here. No matter what he's done, whether you've liked it or not, like Kuso, the Legends of the Hidden Temple thing he did for VHS, they always look really engaging and they always look really interesting. So him doing cosmic horror, I think there's a lot of like kaleidoscope stuff in Interstellar when you look up in the skyline,
Yeah.
quote unquote skyline, or you just have the space station itself is well put together. Everything about the suits looks kind of mechish, but also low budget. So it's really cool that they have developed a unique kind of universe that has all these distinct details. Like there's things that, like you said, it's not Event Horizon. It's not a
Right.
repeat of anything. Those influences are all valid, but I think the visual language of the film is unto itself. Like it looks like Ash. It doesn't look like anything else, even though it's borrowing story beats from others. So for that, I do think it gets the thumbs up for it. It's You can do familiarity, you just have to put your stamp on it, and I think Flying Lotus does that.
I agree. I think that one of the things that impressed me about this movie is, you hear people going, or people coming out of the film and saying, "Oh, it's a riff on Dead Space, right? It's a riff on Resident Evil." Like you said, it definitely is steeped in the current generation of horror survival, third person shooter video games, first person shooter video games. But I think that uh, do we call him Flylo? Is that what we call him, Flying Lotus?
You can call him whatever you want.
I'm going to call him Mr. Lotus because that's
Yeah,
funny to me.
go for it.
I think that I would do like the New York Times. Mr. Lotus, his preoccupation, obsession, appreciation, and lore of video games, I think runs a lot deeper than a lot of folks who might tackle this kind of material. And by that I mean that the film, yes, there's a lot of first person, third person horror. There's literally first person horror that happens in the video game scenes in the movies and some like the fighting flashbacks. You don't cast Iko Uwais as a character in a movie and think that he's not going to like throw some kicks around. So there's definitely like brawler type stuff. But I think that part of what makes Mr. Lotus's film so interesting to me is that he's also steeped in like classic point and click, right? There are a lot of scenes where characters are moving through spaces, and in the background and throughout windows, you see these like fractal geometrical impossibilities in the horizon, the moons and the gases that circle the planet, very, very reminiscent of kind of like a sci-fi themed Mist or something like that. And there's also a lot of like classic RPG elements too. A big chunk of the movie near the end of the film is when Raya, the main character, is kind of communicating with the entity, the presence, the machine that is kind of the thing behind the thing here. And it reminds me so much of like a 1980s, early 1990s like RPG, where it's just like a repeating simple graphic image, this unblinking eye on the screen with like captions running along the bottom, and you have this like dialogue tree effect that is kind of happening there. So it's not a it is to describe this as a movie that's inspired by video games makes it feel like it's only in dialogue with the most recent video games. But I think Ash is 30 years of video game lore, 40 years of video game lore, kind of swept into a new visual language that Mr. Lotus is trying to do. And I think it really works in that regard. I find it so much more visually interesting than a lot of sci-fi horror because it's not limiting itself to kind of one set of accepted aesthetics.
I like that because I do. I think about sci-fi horror, and maybe that's a little bit of the struggle. Like I think about Apollo 18, or sorry, I should even say like more independent sci-fi horror, not even the big
Yeah.
budget stuff. I know Apollo 18 has a bigger budget than some, but you're locked in a spaceship for a lot of time there, or you have something like Europa Report, again, a lot of spaceships. So the cutting corners in a lot of science fiction horror, I think, doesn't work as well. But completely the other side of my argument, you go right to Prospect, like we talked about that already.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic film that is able to do that. And I think Ash fits in the conversation with Prospect of really engaging with trying to do something cosmically engaging. And
Yeah.
that's what it does. But it's also a performance piece because so much of the film, as I alluded to before, rests on Gonzalez and Paul's shoulders. Like those two actors have so much heavy lifting in the front half where sure, maybe the pacing isn't as fast as I want it to be, but they are keeping me in the mystery that is happening because, Raya wakes up and there are just dead bodies everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got one character knocking on the door, the only other surviving character who's trying to convince her what he's saying is right. She doesn't have memory. So all of a sudden you now have the am I an untrustworthy narrator or is this person untrustworthy dynamic going on? And that works once again, like that you have two people knowing how to navigate chemistry together and stoke tension and keep things both sympathetic but also at arm's length. And all of those traits once again uphold a level of suspense that can go along with the visuals. So familiarity, again, it's there, but the element that we're now talking about is performance is elevating. So it's the elevation in every point for me. It's not just another. It's two people in this case trying to do more with not a lot. A lot of empty spaces for two people to explore, and that's it. It's conversational. It's not action packed, and at that point.
And I think it's definitely a two-hander. I think that is kind of at times the film's strength and at times its weaknesses, right? Because I really like Asa Gonzalez. I have ever since I saw her in Baby Driver. I liked her in Ambulance, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. I liked her in Bloodshot. Like she's fantastic. I think that she is one of those actresses that moves easily in and out of the action genre, but has real substance behind her too. And so she can play a character like this, which is sort of one note, but add a bit of depth. It's not a bad thing to have your actors do the heavy lifting on a character that's a little thin on paper if they're up to the task. I think that's a totally good decision for a director to make, is sort of be like, this is going to be 70% performance, 30%, on the page. And I think that's a balance that Mr. Lotus, and this is still funny to me, Mr. Lotus and Asa Gonzalez are able to kind of get at. I have to say, as somebody who never watched Breaking Bad, never quite understood the appeal of Aaron Paul. He's not an actor that I feel a strong connection to. And when I see him in stuff that isn't Breaking Bad, I don't always love him, especially for something like this where he just feels a little mismatched with some of what Gonzalez is doing. So maybe that's just me. I don't want to be unnecessarily mean to the Paulster, but it is one of those things where he's an actor that, as someone who has not and probably will not ever watch Breaking Bad, I associate him more with this caliber of film than I do one of the greatest prestige television shows of all time. And so I don't know. I know that he has done a lot of genre stuff over the last 10 years or so. I don't know how you feel about him as an actor, but I was scrolling through and I was reading about some of the early casting decisions they made for the movie. And I found myself being like, oh, I would love to have had some of those. Maybe I would have loved to have some of those.
I mean, Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Tessa Thompson, of course, that would have been
Yeah.
fantastic. Let's not argue about that at all.
And I'll say I would have loved it to have been Asa Gonzalez and Tessa Thompson. I'll cast my boy Joseph Gordon-Levitt aside and say it could have just been those two actresses, and I think that would have been amazing.
I think that would have been amazing. But I do like the dynamic that Aaron Paul brings because I don't want to say he's unassuming, but the way in which he's able to present his arguments to me makes you believe him. And that is so necessary in the character he is playing because he's trying to convince someone that he isn't the murderer. in so many different ways, but he's also trying to keep her patched up medically, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what keeps her from unlocking memories past. So there is obviously something wrong in this entire scenario. We know there is a red flag planted, but I think someone like Aaron Paul and the way he's able to deliver dialogue and the way he's able to generate, you know, some kind of empathy and for his character, I like him. So
Mm.
that's it works for me. Like that works for me because he's able to play both sides. I see it. He can get a little devious if he needs to, but there is just a like soft face about him that I'm like, okay, I can believe him frantically trying to tell this person like, no, but listen to me. I am trying to help
Yep.
you. I think he nails that part of it.
I do think that the best performance in this film, I think you and I can probably agree with this, is by the Japanese surgery robot that appears throughout the movie, and that is, I am such a sucker for a clever piece of technology, one of those things that's designed to be like, hey, you're at the edge of space and mankind wasn't meant to do this, and so probably you're either sick or teetering on the edge of sanity, and so we've made a really friendly interface, a robot or something like that, in order to like try and keep you grounded a little bit. I think of He Who Shall Not Be Named in Duncan Jones's Moon as a great example of that. Like, I love these little sci-fi corporate touches, and to me that was the strength and the biggest weakness of the film was that robot character, because it sort of spoke to a filmmaker that maybe wasn't quite confident getting a little bit more silly, or I should say was sort of earnestly tackling the material, didn't want to sell it short, which I completely respect, but didn't quite have a sense of where you can kind of punch it up and make it a little bit goofy. You're right. I am the Event Horizon guy, and I think that they're, at the end of their respective careers, Paul W.S. Anderson and Flying Lotus, who knows who will come out ahead. Paul W.S. Anderson had the early lead, but he's kind of not doing anything with it recently, so it could be interesting. It could be interesting to see. But I do think that part of what makes Event Horizon such a compelling movie is that it is like earnest and silly at the same time in a balance that works right. And it does feel a little bit for Ash is that I feel like there are these moments of beautiful silliness where she's, trying to find things in her and going through the surgery robot that is like airing out in another language with a communication barrier. And I did find myself wishing a little bit that maybe that balance could have just been a bit tighter, that there was just enough, that the earnestness, which I like, don't lose the earnestness, don't like wink at the audience, don't nudge. This is not, camp. You absolutely should let people know that this is a movie that should be taken seriously. But I think there was room for a little bit more playfulness, and I especially think the second half of the movie, when the horror takes over, it also kind of diminishes a little bit of the potential for um, goofiness, silliness, whatever you want to call it, like that nice balance of, stabbing with a smile.
I did not find a problem with the health robot. I actually kind of like the interjections of humor, even in the back end. It felt very Dead Space. Some of
Yeah.
those cutscenes are graphic, and like the way that it is just a machine performing surgery. There's no
Hmm.
hesitation there. It's just like, oh, I'm just gonna go at this. The very mechanical healing is I don't know, that hit me in the right way. And I think I agree with you, it was necessary to keep the film a bit more lighthearted because there's so much really dark shit going on.
Yeah.
The beginning has these quick flashbacks to almost like parasitic zombie faces of the crew members, bloodied and attacking, and they're just really quick glimpses. They're really fast. We're playing with a jump scare, but you know what's happening later. We know we're going to see how that plays out and why they're doing that. So when it happens anyway and we see it, it's nice to have a moment here or there to bring us back down really quickly. But it doesn't kill momentum for me either. I really like when we get to that back half, and I really like when we get to the horror centric. It becomes, is this a zombie movie? Is this a parasite movie? Whatever it is, I don't want to spoil too much, but maybe there's allusions to the sci-fi movie Life. Maybe there's allusions to other such films with, I don't know, maybe an organism. Who knows? But that shit hit me. Like that's when the effects really took over, and you get a lot of the brutality. There's a kill in this movie that had me like gasp, laugh, howl all at once because I wasn't ready for it, and it just shoots a rocket. It shoots a rock into a guy's face, and his face is just obliterated. And I'm like, oh fuck! All right, we're here. We're doing this. Got it.
Yeah. And like I'm nitpicking in a way that I don't normally, because sci-fi horror is my genre, right? Like this is the thing that I love. I get, you know, shit all the time for being the Alien guy, but like the Alien franchise has so many different permutations of things that I like. The blue collar and space thing, fucking love. Like evil corporations, fucking love. Like soldiers versus monsters, fucking love. Like all of these over the years of the last 30 years of watching movies, I've sort of spun out the different aspects that I like about the Alien franchise into subgenres that I follow in and of itself. I love soldiers versus monsters. That's like a whole thing that I've written about over the years and that I kind of track. And so there are that when I am saying that there are things about Ash that I wish were better, it's only because I wish that I could give this sort of the full throated endorsement to folks who are not as into this kind of stuff. Like I can recommend Aliens to somebody, and I have, to folks that don't like horror, don't like action movies or whatever, and they'll be kind of like, oh, this is fun. Like I'm into this. This is universally appealing. I think Ash is a really good example. Like I think of a, you know, a smarter version of Pandorum. It's a film that is satisfying, deeply satisfying to those of us that are looking for, begging for good sci-fi horror, and like are subsiding on the crumbs of the sci-fi horror that comes out like once every 2 years or once every 18 months. But you know, it didn't do great in box office, and I think that it is part of that is just it doesn't quite have that non-horror, non-genre fan appeal. I think that based on this, I would say that Flying Lotus absolutely has like a crowd pleaser movie in him. And I'm excited to see what it could look like when he gets that calibration just right, because there is so much different pieces of skill on display here, especially that this is a film that doesn't have, you know, it has a budget about 500,000. It's not even $1 million for the budget, which 20 years ago, and when I was a film critic growing up, 500,000 was not like a hugely like, oh, you know, wow, this only has a budget of 500,000. You'd be like, it's a decent sized independent movie. In 2025, 500,000 is the amount of money that like any producer could fundraise themselves from their immediate network of folks. This is nothing. So I pick because I love Matthew. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
No, that's very valid. And it's very valid because sci-fi horror is just a harder sell too to talk about box office. It's you're trying to sell indie sci-fi horror on top of
Mm-hmm.
all of it. Does we love Shudder, but it's not a Universal Studios picture or anything like that. And the grading on that by people, critics or audiences is always going to be harsher. And I do hold this higher than, like you said, the Crumbs, Pandora, 100% a comparison point. And God, that movie is terrible. Like I do not like Pandorum at all. So
I've watched Pandorum like once every 5 years since it came out, and I've convinced myself that it's better than I remember it being because I don't remember it anymore. It's like I haven't watched Pandorum in like 5 years. I bet it's actually pretty good. So I'm probably going to go watch that one within the next 30 or 45 days. And I think I'm about to be disappointed again.
yeah, it's disappointing because to me, so much is put into the visuals of bigger sci-fi horror films and not the story itself.
Yeah.
Um, Not sci-fi horror, but sci-fi. I mean, the Lost in Space reboot. I just maybe did a video essay for a. I mean, I could say that. Whatever. It's for a company. You'll see it announced anyway. But the visuals are all great there. They put so much work
Yeah.
into recreating the spaceship, into recreating this habitat, yada yada. Go down the list. But it's just like chunked together storytelling that just doesn't make sense. It's all over the place. And I feel like that is a lot of sci-fi horror where, okay, we just need scary aliens, maybe some action, and I don't know, maybe Sam Neill. Who cares? Like that, we just
Yeah.
need to get the right parts in place, and we will attract the crowd. It doesn't work like that because there are so many people like me who have this aversion to sci-fi horror for some reason. And I shouldn't say aversion. I go in open-minded as always. We're film critics, but it's just that subgenre where horror comedies are on top for me. You know, zombie movies, love a zombie movie, love
Yeah.
a slasher. So it's, for my personal taste, that sci-fi horror gets bumped down and you really have to do a lot of work to pull me in. So it's frustrating that, you know, I can see Ash actually like it, and then it's still kind of just like, you know, if it falls in the woods and nobody hears it kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, and I was a Star Wars kid growing up. That is the film that made me, not anymore. Not on any knock. The Last Jedi is fucking amazing. Get that out of the way right now. But that was the franchise. That's what made me fall in love with film when I was like 7 years old or whatever. And the transformative and like the wonder that you still get, that I still get sometimes when you watch a really good movie. So sci-fi is sort of the where I set up base camp, right? That is, sci-fi as a genre is where I said this is where movies hit me the hardest, and everything that I do from there is sort of like an excursion back to my base camp of science fiction. So I agree with you 100%. Like, yeah, it is. There are, you know how I feel about horror comedies. There are things that you watch and you're sort of like, I'm just not going to like this as much as somebody else because it's not my genre. This is my genre. I am impressed by what this film is able to capture, even if I don't think all of it is as big ideas as I would like. Um, but it's also part of the thing where you're like, I think financially, creatively, whatever you want to call it, like film festival-y, I think Flying Lotus is definitely shown enough that somebody's going to go fund whatever his next passion project is, right? Like,
Well, I mean, the soundtrack too. Let's not
oh, it's
discredit that.
great.
Yeah. So and Fly Low again. So it's the total package of what he brings, and I do like that he's working with another writer on this one. So you have a script written by somebody else, and Flylo can focus on everything that he's so
Yeah.
fucking good at. You know, he's out there banging out a soundtrack that is killer for it. So much good cosmic synth vibes. Love it.
Is this going to end up in your vinyl collection, do you think?
If it gets released,
Okay.
I will happily. I
Yeah.
think there's someone I have to talk to at Shutter about that after this. Never mind. I got to go make a text after this. But getting back to the actual point of it, I mean, Flylo, visuals, sound, navigation of a story, all that stuff. I think he does very well from behind the director's chair. Like he's got the look. It's kind of that like Zack Snyder thing where I I don't like a lot of his movies. I will happily say that. But I do think he has a visual style that if he just let somebody else write a fucking movie for him,
Yeah.
I think he could crush that. And Fly Low, I'm not saying he's a bad writer by any means. I want to confirm that. But I am saying that I've liked Ash infinitely more than his other stuff. And I want him to focus on those things, because when he does, it comes out so vividly, like the imaginative element of things. He is such a original creator, and I want that. Like paint the picture for me. Like you've got the canvas right there. Give me the visuals that crush, and then go out there and set those visuals to a fucking banger score. That's I think he's really good at that as a director and filmmaker.
I agree. And I think that is, we over celebrate the multi hyphenate. And by that, I mean that we over celebrate filmmakers that we expect to be able to do everything because we have people, that are a writer, director, producer, editor, actor, right? Like there are examples of these folks throughout the history of the industry. And we're like, this is as good as it gets because they can do everything and they can do everything well. Give me a really good director. Give me a really good writer. Give me a really good like give me John Carpenter, a really good director, writer, composer. Kind of didn't always compose his own stuff, didn't always write his own stuff too, right? Like give me filmmakers that know where their strengths and weaknesses lay and are not so in love with the idea of themselves as the capital A auteur that they're going to limit their ability to make great films because they feel the need to control every aspect of it. And I think that Zack Snyder is a great example of that. I am, for all the annoyances that he has brought into film, and that guy has brought a lot of baggage into the film industry. I don't mind him as a director. I like his attention to detail. I like his aesthetics. I don't necessarily need everything to be grayscale and dusty, but I think there's a lot that he does that's really interesting as a visual filmmaker. but I don't want him to write, and I certainly don't need him in front of the camera. And, for the most part, sometimes things line up and you get that just right. So kudos, if nothing else, kudos to Mr. Lotus for focusing on the areas where we think he can truly be great as a filmmaker. I think that's very true.
Zack Snyder's best movie is Dawn of the Dead, and that is written by James Gunn. Let me just throw that out there.
Hollywood, if you're listening, give $100 million to Flying Lotus to direct but not write his own movie. And then give $100 million to Kid Cudi. I read his graphic novel, his sci-fi graphic novel series. It's really good. Like, give that guy a movie. Let them make competing movies. You know what? Give each of them $50 million.
Let them team up. Fuck that. If we're talking about pairing collaborations, my God, let Cudi write it and then let Flylo go crazy with it.
Give two of our most impressive rapper, DJ, writer, filmmaker, actor, whatever you want to call them. Give them some money. Let's see what kind of weird sci-fi shenanigans they can get up to. All right, so that is Ash. I believe I checked their website. It's playing at like one theater still in its theatrical distribution somewhere in the country. Two more screenings. Maybe even tonight is the last night since this is Thursday. Who knows? It's still kind of popping up as special screenings at a couple of film festivals. It played at Overlook just this past weekend. So if you have a genre film festival near you, you may get very lucky and it may be part of the programming as a special mention. But it is and should be headed to Shudder Prime, not Amazon Prime, Shudder proper, in just a couple of weeks. So I feel like this has benefited a bit from a longer lead time than most Shudder really. I feel like we've been talking about this one for a minute. I think Shudder's done a good job of kind of rolling out the red carpet for it. And I feel like folks have talked about this during the theatrical window in a way that a lot of Shudder films don't get. So you've heard some hype. Donato and I are here to say it's worth checking out on your own. Should be available for streaming very, very soon. Donato, you are, as always, a busy little beaver. So if folks want to stay connected to you online and see whatever kind of weird film shit, including apparently a video commentary about the Lost in Space movie that I was obsessed with for like 3 months when I was 12 or whatever, where do folks follow you on social media?
You can follow me at Donatobomb, DONATOBOMB, and that's going to be Blue Sky, Instagram, and Letterboxd. I'm going to try to be better about all three. I kind of fell off just a little bit. I don't know. I've been exhausted and it's hard to work 2 jobs and also keep a social media persona going. So I should be out of the funk soon and posting everything that I'm doing because, I've got a busy April slated already. I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 drafts open. So, big things coming, baby.
I love that. And I'm not kidding. Lost in Space came out in 1998. That was my entire personality as a 14-year-old for the better part of a summer. It was like the coolest movie ever. And I've never revisited it. And I feel like maybe I shouldn't. I should just hold on to those memories.
It's one of those, we can't grade past art on current technology, but man, some of those digital effects look fucking woof at this point. And
I can imagine.
Especially in 4K, not doing it favors.
Fair enough. As for myself, you can follow me just on Blue Sky. It's Monagle at et cetera, or at Monagle, et cetera. And if you have not realized this yet, we have relaunched Certified Forgotten. We are now live as a subscription-based platform, which means we have both a newsletter tier as well as a paid subscriber tier. You can follow all of our writers. If you follow our writers on social media, you'll always have access to gift links for the pieces, so you'll never actually miss an article that we publish. But go to certifiedforgotten.com, sign up for our newsletter at the bottom of the page. First issue should be coming out in the next couple of days. Costs nothing to subscribe. And from there, stick around, see if you like what we're doing. Maybe consider throwing a little bit of financial support our way. Economy's super fucked. I'm not going to hold it against you if you don't do that immediately, but we hope to earn your support at some point soon. That's it for us. We'll see you next week.